Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
Ken Van Dyke of Scandinavia is a Republican candidate in the 14th Senate District. The primary is August 11th. Ken, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you, Steve. Much appreciated.
When I check your campaign website, you have worked on environmental issues since the 1980s. So I just want to ask you as the first question, is the environment a big part of your campaign?
I would say it started off really big. We started, I was a citizen appointee to the Wisconsin Radioactive Waste Committee that was formed in response to the Department of Energy wanting to bring a nuclear waste repository to Wisconsin. And I was instrumental in helping to fight that. That kind of got me off to my start. And I've always been concerned with the land we live on, the water we use, and the air that we breathe ever since then. With my scientific background, I have always been concerned, and I may have a little different views than some of my fellow party mates do, but they're all based in science, and I mean to have the best for my children and my grandchildren.
Okay, well, let's work down some specific issues. If Governor Evers is right, and we may have a $2 billion shortfall in tax collections because of the pandemic, legislators like you, if you're elected a senator, choices of cut spending, raise taxes, or fees. Your reaction to those?
Wow, $2 billion. Let's face it. If tax collections do fall, and I believe they will, then we're going to have some hard decisions to make in the next budget. I'll be listening to what the people of my district think about it, and I'll be basing my role in any budget negotiations on feedback I'll be gathering from my district. I will listen to my constituents rather than simply listen to the usual establishment top-down of what the leaderships want. I will be going back to the leadership saying, this is what my constituents think about it. This is what I think is fair, and then let's go from there. There will undoubtedly be pain in next year's budget. I would like to see that the pain is shared equally between our smaller rural counties and the larger, more urban counties. My rural regions of the state have gotten the short end of the stick for far too long from Madison and from the people we elect to send to Madison on our behalf. This lack of fairness and equality through our rural regions needs to stop. I do believe in fiscal responsibility and sustainability, and I'm not saying that there can be zero borrowing. In fact, there's going to be some. What I am saying is that we need to be careful that we don't overburden the taxpayers of the state now or into the future. Wisconsin is a great place to live, work, and raise a family, and being irresponsible with taxpayers' monies could have a large negative impact on that.
Thank you. The debate in the Capitol over who should draw the next congressional and legislative district lines. The Constitution said the party in power should draw the lines, but the Governor Evers would like a People's Commission to draw the lines and then send that plan over to lawmakers to enact. What's your feeling over who should draw the next boundaries?
This is an issue I've been hearing a lot about all since spring when I started. I firmly believe that the legislature needs to be involved in this process, and the state constitution does require it. But I do hear comments that the role the legislature plays kind of bends what the state's constitutional framers had in mind, and there's a little discomfort with the use of big data to draw district lines rather than using existing county and municipal boundaries. Other commenters say there's merit to the argument that the left should be just run better candidates in certain areas, and that sometimes Republicans just recruit better people more in tune with their constituency. There's also legitimacy to the demographic argument that Democratic voters tend to be more urban and Republicans tend to be more rural. So in some sense, it is just population trends. Senate District 14 is extremely large and stretches from parts of Waupaca and Shawano County in the north over 135 miles into some Madison suburbs in the south. People on one end can be very different from people living on the other end. It's a very difficult district to campaign in because of the dissimilarities in people throughout such a big area, and the fact that the boundary lines cut off many municipalities from their neighbors. Newspapers and radio stations inside the district sometimes don't have major coverage inside the district, and newspapers and radio stations outside of the district sometimes have more coverage than the ones inside the district do. This makes campaigning and communicating with the district much more difficult and more expensive. I'll need to talk more with my constituents and then find out what the legislature has in mind down in Madison before I do make a final decision on this.
Okay, new subject. Illinois just legalized recreational marijuana. What's your position on both legalizing recreational and medical marijuana? Ken?
Hey, let me see here. This is an issue we need to approach with caution. I think medical marijuana is on the table. We prescribe things that are far worse and more addictive to people already, and that's partially why we have the opioid epidemic. I think the step to full legalization needs to be taken more cautiously, if at all, because we just spent several decades convincing people not to smoke, and now we're saying it's okay. On the positive side, other comments I've heard is that it would help farmers with a profitable cash crop, and the state would make more money in new taxes and jobs created. That has to be considered too. But is it going to result in far more problems than it is worth? Anyone attempting to promote full legalization has a lot more convincing to do.
Okay. New subject. We know a lot more about how some police officers treat those in custody than we did 4 or 5 months ago. The governor's recommended like a 9-bill package that would ban chokeholds and ban no-knock warrants and uniform training standards for those that want to be police officers. Could you support anything in the governor's package? Do we need some type of police reform?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in local government and local control of law enforcement. And I'm also a very strong believer in what a great police force we have in general in the state of Wisconsin. But after all, who knows better than the people of the community itself what will work and what won't work for them? Law enforcement in bigger municipalities is going to be a lot different from law enforcement in the smaller towns and villages from my district. What happened in Minneapolis is completely unacceptable, and the ferocity of the protests that followed definitely warrants a full examination of those issues. I think standardized guidelines should be put forth by the state, and then each individual community could adopt or modify those guidelines depending on their local situations. From what I understand, the Department of Justice already has a lot of those in place, and most of our law enforcement agencies do abide by them. And again, I have a lot of faith in our police departments and in our municipalities to work it out among themselves and come up with the best solutions for each individual community.
A couple questions on property taxes. Because Wisconsin is a high property tax state, there have been caps and limits on what school districts and local governments can levy in property taxes. Although, of course, you can exceed these caps and referendums and limits with referendums. If you're a state senator voting on the next state budget, would you vote to keep these property tax caps and limits in place?
Yeah, we don't need more taxes. We need to have everyone pay their fair share of the taxes that we do have, and we need to have the government start distributing them more fairly and using them more responsibly. It is sad that local communities are faced with the burden of, again, raising taxes on themselves because state and federal government underfunds them. I know why communities feel they have to do it without their schools. And if you can't attract young families and the businesses that employ them without good schools, we've got major problems. I would like to see the state and federal funding increased for more of it, so more of the burden could be taken off the municipalities. If that were to happen, I could see removing the caps. But now that we have the COVID problems, especially, they're probably going to have to remain in place for a while.
Well, because local governments are so reliant on the property tax, they sometimes ask, shouldn't we have alternative sources of revenue, maybe broadening the state sales tax to some now exempt products and services, maybe even giving local governments the ability to levy a half-cent sales tax? Is it time to consider giving local governments revenue options, Ken?
Yeah. The problem I have with that is it is more taxes. I would be more open to this if the taxes and alternative revenues actually went to relieve property taxes and wouldn't be used to fund additional government programs, which I've seen happen as well. If one tax could go up, the other could go down, and the tax money wouldn't be used to let government be less responsible with more public dollars, that'd be great. I think we should evaluate where the state's public funds are going currently before we consider putting another tax on the public. But if it is directly associated with property tax decrease, then I could see examining it further.
Okay. We have yet to come up with a stable source of funding for highways. The governor recommended increasing our gas tax, which is 30.99 cents per gallon. Last year, it didn't pass. The gas tax hasn't been raised in 10 years. Could you support a gas tax increase?
Okay, something has to be done, especially in our rural communities on this. Towns and villages, us rural communities up here, this is a huge district, as you well know. We're responsible for 61,000 miles of roads in Wisconsin, over half of the total road miles in the state. In 2015, we're on a road replacement schedule of 371 years. So once every 4 centuries, we get a road replaced up here. It's gotten somewhat better, a little bit, but marginally so. We do get less than 5% of the state funding for roads. So about 95% of the time, our own taxes go to support somebody else's roads. Our smaller municipalities comprise almost a third of Wisconsin population. We occupy over 95% of the state's geographic area. We are spread out, underrepresented, and we're easy to ignore. Many of our roads are in a constant state of disrepair. Another example, what my reasoning is that we do need more tax money somehow or other, and that's what I would like to see.
Okay, thank you. A couple questions on the pandemic. We've seen, we talked about how it cuts tax revenues both for state and local governments. We've seen how hospitals are responding both in Wisconsin and the nation to the COVID-19 pandemic. If you're a state senator voting on the next state budget, should hospitals have an even greater priority than they may have in the current budget, Ken?
I believe, excuse me one second, I've got to look at my notes here and come up with that. I wish I had more experience with live interviews, but this campaign has not been the best.
Hospitals, greater priority in the next budget?
Let's see. Hospitals need to have some, they do, I think we need to examine each individual hospital, examine their individual situation. There will be some hospitals that need the funding and others that don't. I would like to see that, again, that the local rural hospitals in our smaller counties are brought along with this. Yes, there's going to be a need for it. I think we need to make sure that they're ready for the rest of this pandemic and future pandemics as well. And as long as it's applied equally between the larger municipalities and the smaller municipalities, then yes, I think we need to look into that.
Okay, here's a question that's being debated in Washington as we speak. The Senate Majority Leader McConnell just came out with a package that $1 trillion in COVID-19 aid, and part of it would say if you're a business that has followed the safety precautions of the CDC or the WEDC you would be immune from frivolous lawsuits. Is that something you could support?
Okay. I think we need to take a lesson from our current COVID pandemic plan first, and then formulate a plan for the future. Leadership and legislatures have caused many more COVID cases and deaths by refusing to require the use of masks during the pandemic and by ignoring the advice of the experts. Many people out here fear for their lives, and they stay home, they stay isolated from the rest of society, or the death tolls would be even higher. I think these people are you don't hear much about them because we're staying home, we're staying away, we're more concerned for our lives. We need to follow scientific facts and medical advice until these vaccines are available. We should also show consideration and respect for the lives, health, and well-being of everyone, especially our frontline workers, elderly, and people at high risk by wearing masks. If we had followed the experts' advice and ignored the politicians, we would be much better off, and many thousands of deaths could have been prevented. My plan for future outbreaks would be to put soundproof masks over the politicians' mouths and put the experts in charge. And yes, provide protections for the business owners who are only trying to make the best of a poorly thought out situation, but hold the legislators responsible who are causing the sickness and deaths with their actions, who are ignoring the suffering, pain, and deaths caused by their decisions. My friend who I served with on county board, a wonderful man, has died from COVID. He died 3 days after his wife, another wonderful person, died from COVID. My county had one death and 19 illnesses due to COVID when legislative leaders defied the experts and opened the county too soon and didn't require masks. My county now has 330 illnesses and 14 deaths. Across the state, there are 49,000 illnesses and 893 deaths, and they are increasing every day. Across the United States of America, it's even worse. These unnecessary deaths and illnesses are caused by our political leaders, who should be getting down on their knees and asking God to forgive them and apologizing to the families of the people who have died. If this was a terrorist action, there would be massive reaction, calls for justice, and demands that the killers be brought to justice. Well, this is like a domestic terrorist operation, and it is brought about for the cause of political expediency. It needs to be stopped.
New subject. When a school board or a local government wants to authorize a major public works project, should they be required to offer a preference to Wisconsin businesses? And let me explain one reason I asked. A study found in 2015 that out-of-state contractors got $72 million in public works contracts, but this more than doubled to 146 in 2018. Should local governments have to give a preference to Wisconsin businesses?
I think it depends, again, on the local municipality. I don't think there should be a requirement on any municipality to have to approach it one way or another. I know it's probably about 50-50. The municipalities I'm familiar with want to promote the use of local contractors if there's a reasonable distance between them and the next low bidder. And there are others that say, no, we got to watch out for our taxpayers. We got to save every cent we possibly can. If this is the low bid we get, then that's the low bid we have to take. Again, I think it's up to each individual municipality to decide. Maybe they've got people that live right in their district that they're going to be providing a job for. Maybe it's very close by and they have other reasons for wanting to do it that way. Leave them the option. Give them the choice. Let them make it on their own.
Okay. And my final question is, do you want to highlight any differences between you and your opponent in the August 11 primary?
Let's see. I guess what I would say is my opponent pays more attention to what the state leaders want her to do and less attention to what her local municipalities want her to do. She voted to pass that state budget that raided our segregated funding and caused us to raid local taxes despite vigorous protests from us. County boards and other municipalities sent unanimous resolutions and other communications opposing those actions, all to no avail. She seems to think that her bosses are in Madison. I think that my bosses are the ones who vote me into the job.
Okay, thank you. Ken Van Dyke of Scandinavia is a Republican candidate in the 14th Senate District. The primary is August 11. Ken, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you, Steve, and much appreciated.
Thank you.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.